Today we're visiting a gem of a museum. It's the Museum of English Rural Life in Reading. It's actually part of Reading University. And it's unusual. I'm no farmer. I have no great farming pedigree. I can't claim I thought much about the history of farming since I played with tractors as a boy. But as you walk around here, it has an eclectic and thorough and well curated collection with lovely explanations of a slice of English life that's lost forever. As you come in, there's a long hall, and on one side is about 15 wagons. And at first you just think, well, they're wagons, they're all the same. But there's an explanation, and it's by county. So they explain the different types of carts and the reasons for the way the wheels were laid out the way they were, and the size of them. For example, the one in Wiltshire, because it's quite hilly, they tilted in the wheels a bit more, and the axle had a different level of flexibility. And due to the different crops and the different landscape, there was a different style of length and width and height. And in many ways you could say that's boring. Some of you are probably already thinking that. But it's just lovely seeing this large collection of carts which otherwise would just be lost to time. It's like being in a Thomas Hardy novel with beautiful farm carts, all well preserved and maintained, all of them at least 100 years old, most of them 150 or more. And also here you have things like, this is from a blacksmith, the bellows there. It was a large bellows for a furnace blacksmith. And all these different hay wains and carts. And different tools, like that's a turner for turning wood. All the sort of country crafts are represented here. And I really found it interesting seeing how different the carts are. At first they look the same, but it's explained very nicely, and there's a lot of different crafts and parts of making carts and the tools for making them, the various equipment. It's all really well labelled. You come out of here thinking you're an expert on English country crafts. And it's quite a small museum. It's probably about 40 minutes to see everything. But I can't think of anywhere that I've seen horse-drawn carts like this on this scale, or such a broad collection of them. And this is just the first room on the way in. You can see these two here. You have the Staffordshire. It's quite low and squat and wide compared to, this is like a, it's almost like a horse-drawn horse box. And then here you have a Lincolnshire cart. And all of them are real carts. They're not reconstructions. They're real carts from real farms. And they have a small piece of the history of that farm and their uses, their makers, and really just a lost slice of rural England. I must admit, I came here the first time thinking, well, it's free. But actually, it's a lovely little museum. It's small enough to be enjoyed without winding up your whole day. And at the same time, it's got a very quaint feel to it. And it has a lot of little collections, like here, the horse brasses. There in the last window, there was the equipment explaining the different farm structure, the hierarchy. And just seeing these up close is quite popular with kids because they love all the different carts because they're all quite large, and you do wonder how they actually got them into the building, but I think the clue is behind this one. There's a door in the middle of the room, and this wall isn't really particularly structural. But it is crammed full, this museum. And when you go upstairs, it's even more so, but with smaller items. And there's a whole explanation of the history of rural life, the crafts, the different crops, the machinery and tools and equipment. Like here's a milling stone for grinding seeds or corn. And here you have, this one's quite interesting, although it's out of focus there. It's a horse-drawn cart for a farm, but it's covered over. It reminds me a little bit of Little House on the Prairie, which I always used to avoid as a child. Whereas what you will see is that most English horse-drawn farm carts weren't actually covered. They were much more like this style here. Interesting explanation of the way the wheels are kept on. There's the linchpin that goes through the middle, which is actually where the word or phrase linchpin comes from. It's a pin that going through the wheel makes sure the wheel can't come off, because it effectively binds it, and with the angle of the axle and the wheels, the weight of the cart presses them in, so it holds it in place, and the linchpin runs straight through the hub. There's a boss on the hub that sticks out. See this one in a minute, it's round the other side. Not a cart. So it's not all carts, don't worry. You're not going to watch half an hour of farm carts. There's really all sorts of equipment and farm tools. I can't even tell you what this one is. Mechanical machine. There's also some lovely pictures of country life and of these carts in use. They were kind of the tractors and lorries of their day. And actually upstairs there's a nice little sled from when it was cold. We'll see that in a minute. And then round here, explanation of this cart here. But also in the background there, you have from the Festival of Britain. The Festival of Britain was held on the South Bank. If you go to where the National Theatre is, and there's a big sort of giant needle suspended in the air, it's called the Skylon. That was where the festival was held. And it was a sort of post-war celebration of Britain, so that the world could see Britain's achievement in everyday life and crafts. And each county had a display, and this is, I believe it was Cheshire. So this is a giant tapestry displaying what Cheshire looked like. And here was a sculpture like a wicker man, not like the film, but more like you'd see at Halloween or at a country festival. Basically a man made out of hay. But it was made for the 1951 Festival of Britain, and it's been preserved here along with everything else in this room. Interesting tools for picking crops. There's a thresher there where the paddles swish around and basically split the crop. And obviously there's much better explanations than I'm giving when you actually read the panels there. And again, grinding machine. And it's a good explanation of everything. You see there's always a photo, nice digestible text. Around a corner, some more crafts. So this is all cheese related. So cheese pressing, cheese draining, for rolling, for cooking, or at least warming it, for taking the water out of it. And here, the different crops, different types of grass that you find in grasslands on farms, and quite interesting collection. There's a lot more types. When you drive past a farm, you think that's grass, but that actually shows and describes the different species and types of grass that you see on English farms. And here, effectively, a combine harvester. Here, just immediately post-war, a small tractor. It's a sort of tractor plough. Reminds me a little bit, if you see my video of the Imperial War Museum in London, there's a tractor from the Beechers which looks very much like that. And it's sort of taking that concept and bringing mechanisation to farms. Some nice models, an explanation of threshing and the different equipment that was used to thresh crops. And the seed drill for planting seed equally. There's models and explanations and tools and different approaches to that. And you get a glimpse upstairs. There's actually a whole gallery upstairs, and we'll be going there in a minute. Here's some toy tractors. Not so popular these days, but I remember as a child, everyone liked tractors, and every boy had a collection of tractors. Well, they have a whole bunch here of tractors and farm equipment that were children's toys. And here's one of the Massey Ferguson tractors, one of the very first ones post-war. And now we're upstairs, just walking along. Large collection of wheelbarrows from farms, and you can see all the different types of milk churns and water churns. Cleaning equipment. Some of the tools you think, what are they? But a pretty good explanation. And here there's a little ladybird gallery. Part of it you're not allowed to take photos of, so I'll try and avoid that bit. But some interesting examples of the art and the different books, and very much a part of English life. Sort of died off by the 2000s, but if you see the ones in the bookshelf, you can see the more modern ones with very different spirit, the more educational earlier ones. And I guess entertainment wasn't as compelling as education. Then we're back out into the corridor, and the length of the building is a corridor with, on the one side, ploughs that we'll see in a second. On the other side, display cabinets. But display cabinets actually move, so there's a lot more than you can really see. Now loads of ploughs. Here all sorts of things like a cabinet of wickerware. So there's a Sutton Hoo mask made out of wicker. There's different baskets and fruit bowls and everything you could possibly make out of weave, corn, and different tools for planing wood, for cutting, not just for farming, but all the tools you needed for that. And the whole way along here is a very detailed explanation of different types of plough, explaining the regional variation, the styles, the like a wheel plough, a swing plough, a drawn plough. Then metal plaques from the countryside. That's a big fishing net. At the back here, loads of tools. You can see different saws and cutters for sheep and marketing pieces on the wall here. And these are the cabinets all the way down. You can spin a wheel to move them, although there is a sign asking you not to, so I didn't. Here's where they actually come and examine. So they have a sort of semi-sealed room where they can examine the various parts of the collection. Here more ploughs. The ploughs were a little bit lost on me. There was so many that it really takes a bit to understand how they evolved and what the differences are between them. And it's interesting how it's very regional. You could see that manufacturing wasn't global like today, where you have one manufacturer who sells in every country in the world, and you could pretty much see the same plough, or let's say a tractor plough. You could see the same one in Italy as you see in Spain, as you see in probably Bolivia. Whereas back then, there were manufacturers within counties, and you can see that there's quite substantial differences between the shape of the blade for ploughing, the principle of how it worked. Here down this side we had loads of smocks, so farmers' clothing, things they would wear when they're out and about. You need hard wearing, needs to be able to cope with bad weather. Farming's probably got easier, but it certainly wasn't an easy life back then. And large collection of clothes. As you wander around here, it's a really interesting collection of slices of country life, like different types of lamp there, pottery that was country related, and you see biscuit tins, chocolate tins, all of which have a country theme to them or related to country life. And you can spend hours looking at all these different items. Maybe they're not valuable, but they're very interesting. And as I said earlier, this part of Reading University, so it's effectively a university museum collection, everything related to English country life. A little bit like the Petrie Museum in London or the Grant or Cole Museums of Zoology, where you have educational and teaching exhibits and items of real historical significance, and also just miscellaneous artifacts related to the topic. And it's certainly a lot bigger and more thorough than you might expect. There's a subtle reminiscence about English country life. Is certainly a way that's completely lost today. But it's also just a historical archive of that history. And the good thing is, if you're coming here, you can also go to Reading Museum, which is a particularly good county town museum. It has a lot on Silchester Roman town and the Bayeux Tapestry and various things that happened around Reading and Reading Abbey. There's 2 museums up at the university as well. So those are a bit harder to get to. Parking is terrible at the university unless you have a student pass. And here there's free parking outside, or there's parking in the street, much easier. Here on this floor we have an explanation of country life from artifacts related to various topics. So this is like a home with, you can see there, an Aga cooker, different types of cooking and eating and tools. Like that's a bench which had storage in the back and allowed the farm workers to sit and eat their food. Various crafts here. Here, this is a lawnmower. Yep. So it's a steam-powered lawnmower, and it's quite an interesting piece, quite substantial. You'd want a very big lawn for that, and you would probably want someone else to push it. Around here, various art related to the landscape and explaining the year on a farm. So there's kind of a seasonal structure to it. So you have ploughing, sowing, and various equipment from different eras. So you can see how sowing went from just swinging it with your hand to having a side pouch to having a sort of forward basket which allowed you to reach it more easily, to then mechanisation. And then obviously you get to summer, your crop's grown, you have to cut it, so you want to cut it above the ground at sort of inch off the ground, at kind of through the stalk. And then having cut it and collected it, you put it in a wagon to take it for treatment. And then you need to, scythes and various tools for cutting it, transporting it, wheelbarrows, and you're into autumn and you're preparing for the new year. So different equipment for ploughing and for muck spreading and fertilizing, and then treating some of the stuff and actually working with the crops. And in winter, there's an explanation of different elements there and things that they did during the winter. I mentioned earlier the sled. This sled was owned by, I think it was a butcher and a farmer. So when it got really cold in northern England, they didn't get delayed by the snow. Now here, these were really interesting. Maybe I'm a geek, but it's a board with a large collection of labelled horseshoes. So you could see different types of horseshoe for different types of horse and different task, but also explaining how their manufacture changed and they became more refined to the kind of styles. Because you normally think of almost the one that you sometimes see hanging over a door. An explanation of dairy produce, so buckets for carrying milk and for milking cows, models of machinery for doing that, various clothes and marketing materials of milk, different doorstep delivery, so some examples of an early delivery wagon for milk and a load of different bottles on the wall there. Here, a nice steam engine that you sometimes see. It's a moving steam engine which you can connect a belt to the thing on the side, the wheel on the side, and that lets you power other devices. Here's a hand pumped fire engine, so subscription fire service, and couple of people either side. You pull down your side, the other side goes up, they pull theirs down, and that helps power the fire pump and pumps the water. And then different bits of historical material from countryside. I liked this old Land Rover at the end here. This is one of the early Land Rovers, and a very uncomfortable looking bike there. And some farming related clothing. They've got the French Wellington boots that the guy who founded Glastonbury used to wear when he was doing more farming, the music promotion. Just a lot of significant and insignificant, but glad they're preserved kind of items. There's a tractor toy, a ride-along tractor that you pedal. Then, in keeping with the country life aspect, there's a lot about the hunting ban and different tools and crafts. I particularly like the bit in the middle there about the last bowl turner. So there was a man who, I think 3 or 4 generations, had turned bowls from wood that was harvested. And he was filmed for a TV show and he became a bit of a celebrity known as the last bowl turner. And that was the machinery from his workshop. And here you've got different wooden tools and wooden products and roofing there from a thatched cottage. So you could see the different country crafts, because farming's always been a lot more than just people herding sheep and cutting crops. It's a whole economic and hopefully you reached this point and you enjoyed the guide to this museum. I'd say really it's an ode to country life, to a country life which our grandparents knew and our great grandparents knew, but really has died and is lost to time. And there are still farmers if we support them, but it's a very different world to the rural world of the 1950s and before. And this museum captures that and keeps it for posterity. So I certainly really enjoyed it. This is my second or third visit to this museum. I'd say if you're coming, well worth going to Reading Museum, just down the hill from here. And if you're going there, Reading Abbey has reopened recently and is just round the corner from that, and it links in. We'll be covering Reading Museum in a few weeks' time on one of the Saturday museum tours, and we'll definitely be doing Silchester, which is a Roman town lost to time, which is very near to Reading, and the collection is in Reading Museum. So yeah, please subscribe, and I'll look forward to seeing you soon. And I definitely recommend a visit to the Museum of English Rural Life.